Right, so let's look at the things that contribute to the macro environment. Right, political, legal factors. I'm not going to go into the detail here. You've seen it since year one. I think for me, and I like the idea of keeping political and legal factors together, so I don't like doing the whole pestle thing where we separate political and legal factors, because the simple truth is politicians introduce legislation. From a political legal perspective, you can see the areas where politics will impact and government will impact. Obviously, they are there to regulate. They are there to provide parameters within which we operate. And sometimes they bring about constraints. You can see the kinds of things. Trade policies, we've got a competitions board, tax programs, and then there are benefits. I think our laws protecting patents are pretty good, but also grants and subsidies in terms of business launches and tax breaks. They can also fund R&D. Now, what we're not seeing on this slide, and I think that the textbook is clearly wanting to be politically correct, is in South Africa, it is the instability of the government that is a real concern, but it also would be the levels of corruption that we're dealing with. And all of those create a landscape that essentially makes doing business in South Africa very, very difficult. If you want, please watch, and I get incredibly depressed when I watch it. Watch Carte Blanche from Sunday, so the 24th. Sunday the 24th. Watch that Carte Blanche and have a glance at the master's office and how the master's office is being manipulated. Please do me a favor. It is a wonderful, wonderful piece of reporting. It is terrible, Enrique, and I watched that and I honestly just am blown away. And I did know some deputy directors, etc., that used to work for the master's office. But because they were honest, they were all suspended and worked out of the system. Some of them have been sitting on paid leave for years, because we suspend the good people, we remove the anti-corruption people, and we replace them with lackeys, and then we just don't fire, we don't bring charges against the anti-corruption people, and we then just leave them on permanent paid leave, essentially. The problem is, and I've helped a couple of those individuals. I think you guys know that my master's degree is in labor law, and I've helped a couple of those individuals to force the departments to have hearings against them. But not once has the department brought the actual evidence, brought the charges. So we just suspend and we put people on permanent paid leave. But it's about removing the people that are anti-corruption. It's an awful system. I've had several clients that I've helped with. Now remember, I'm not an attorney, just my master's is in labor law. So, but I used to work quite a bit for these clients, actually. Economic factors, the growth of the economy, GDP. We know that COVID's had a huge impact in terms of our economy. We know that these floods, we know that the riots. I'd like to see the 1.3 trillion rand in investments that Cyril promised. I worry that Cyril has become a political animal, and I know that Cyril is not corrupt and is Mr. Clean, but he's surrounded by toxins, and trying to adopt a consensus approach to government when you're surrounded by toxins is very, very, very difficult. Interest rates, I'm not sure what the interest rate is at the moment. I think our repo rate must be about 4.5%. I know somebody will tell me while I keep talking. Currency exchange rates, I don't know what the rand dollar and the pound is, must be about 19 and 14 or 15. Euro must be about 17. And then price inflation, we're seeing a slight price inflation increase simply because of cooking oil becoming so incredibly expensive. The one that is not mentioned here is balance of payments, trade versus import costs. And then the other one that we forget about is the fact that 70% of our GDP goes to feeding government costs. We also forget to mention on this slide, the fact that we keep lending money, and we lend money that we have no chance of paying back. So what will happen is that we'll simply just be colonized by Russia, and in particular, we'll be colonized by China. Dollar is 15.66. Thanks so much, Boyo. So dollar 15.66, euro must be about pound 19.98, so not so far out. And I think the euro would be somewhere between those two, 17 odd rand, Boyo. I'll wait for Ruan to look for me. And then socio-cultural factors. Euro is 16.82. Thank you so much, guys. Well done for helping your unprepared lecturer out. And then your socio-cultural factors, we can see the kinds of issues that are there. I'm not going to go through all of those. I think we know that there are issues in terms of our education system, that we produce all these matrics where we produce the standard of the matric to such an extent that we are creating people that are not ready for university, that are not ready for the world of work. We've had dual income families for a long time, so it's not an increasing trend. It is a reality. There is definitely a trend towards health and wellness, so exercise equipment, mountain bikes, nutrition, and those kinds of things are being sold, but it's really only for the sort of upper middle class, wealthier group of individuals. Yeah, opportunities for leisure and recreation. People are trying to find new ways of getting their work-life balance right. And then the age distribution. And we know that our life expectancy has gone up, but we know that life expectancy in Europe is touching 90, and because of that, you will spend more than 30% of your life in retirement. And what it means, if you spend 30% of your life in retirement, you need to prepare for retirement, or the social costs on a country would be significant. We also know that 80% of your medical costs happen in the last 20% of your life. And so the knock-on effect of an aging population is that there'll be extreme pressures on social systems. I don't know whether HIV/AIDS is a reality. I don't know whether you guys care about HIV/AIDS. That it is a hectic equation, Boya. So yeah, 80% of your medical costs in the last 20% of your life. It's the 80-20 Pareto principle, I think it was called. But in terms of impact of HIV/AIDS, as a generation, do you guys still worry about HIV/AIDS, or have we got to a point where wearing protection is just natural and we don't fuss too much about it anymore? Is AIDS an issue in your minds still? I'm talking to you as a generation. Do you guys still worry about HIV/AIDS? Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, boy. And then demographic factors continued. You can see the size and composition of a. No one's worried about it. The idea of the gap in wealth and the fact that parliamentarians earn in the top 2.2% of the country, those kinds of things irk me immensely. Also changes in the ethnic composition. We see many people leaving the country, and also this mobility where people work between different countries, work in another country and send money home. It's very much part of the evolution in terms of technology and where the world is at. Guys, and then just technological factors. Yeah, entire new industries. Give me examples of new industries that were spawned in the recent past. Guys, I'm just going to keep going and then we'll finish early. I've got to get ready for Varsity College. I've got face-to-face classes and I've got a meeting straight between my face-to-face classes. What new industries have been created? What new industries have been created, and all a consequence of technology. Think of Uber as a new industry. E-commerce, absolutely. E-commerce, massive, massive, massive. I'm just glancing. In South Africa, the business of cannabis, it's an interesting one, CBD, etc. Driverless cars, clean technologies, lab-grown meat, commercial space travel, biotech, esports, cybersecurity, lots of new industries. Hey? Veganism. Do we have any vegans in class so we can point and laugh at you? Yeah, so it's quite interesting that those were pretty cool. Cannabis farming, etc. Virtual reality, without a single shadow of a doubt, as well, Poya. And then altering the boundaries between industries. It's quite interesting how, you know, when you think of what an iPad is, and is an iPad different to an iPhone, and is an iPad different to a laptop, where is the divide? Or are those just all simply mobile devices? In my mind, they're all just simply mobile devices. Tourism and hospitality, there's a blurring of the boundaries between those. Absolutely. I think the boundaries of industries are altering all the time, and e-commerce having an effect in terms of what would have been traditionally brick and mortar stores, and how brick and mortar stores had to catch up and adjust the way they do business. I have to admit that last Saturday, as a bit of retail therapy, I went and bought clothes in real life, in a real shop. For the first time. I generally shop online because I'm always the same size. But I went to Mr. Price and I got some trail shoes and I bought some stuff. And it was quite strange going in and buying clothes, having to stand and wait to go into a dressing room. I can't remember when last I did that. And the killing off of existing industries. Give me examples of industries that have disappeared. Industries that have disappeared. Guys, there are lots of those, and will. Newspapers, surely, well, those are disappearing. Jobs, my apologies. But we also see jobs disappearing. Encyclopedias, DVD stores, yeah, we're getting on a roll here. What else is it? The print media, we spoke about that. I mean, secretaries, why do we need secretaries? Booksellers, taxi services, delivery services. There's so many that has changed, and I think the reality is we'll see more industries disappearing into the future. What's happened to typewriters and those kinds of things. And then also the change of the competitive structure. So if, yeah, Packers on a macroeconomic scale, yeah. Guys, if we think of competitive structure, traditionally to compete in terms of retail, you needed a brick and mortar store and you need display shelves. The opposite is true now. You need a decently designed you need a decently designed website with a pretty decent interface. And so what it has done is changed the competitive structure, because in the past you could only compete in retail if you had a brick and mortar store. Now you need a website, and we've seen how the traditional brick and mortar stores, as I've said, have had to adjust. Lower barriers to entry. Again, you can enter into traditional retail by having the right connects with suppliers, and all you become is this midpoint through your website to sell. So it changes the barriers to entry. You don't have to find a property, you don't have to build, you don't have to install shelves. All happens behind a screen. Yeah, reduce customer switching costs. It's very difficult to maybe move from Apple to Android, but if you're on an Android device, I can easily move from Sony to Samsung. I can move from Samsung to Oppo. I don't know what some of the other newer brands are. I can easily move to Hisense. There's no headache with any of that. And then also high levels of competition. And I really think traditional stores underestimated the impact of these online stores. And then lower prices. And not so true at the moment. South Africa is fairly expensive, but competition reduces prices, because in terms of online stores, they should be far cheaper than your brick and mortar stores, which is unfortunately the opposite when it comes to Takealot. And then just in terms of what technology does, it kills off traditional sources of competitive advantage. Think of my retail example. It extends the organizational reach. If you think how widely Amazon can reach, what footprint Amazon has, it's intense. Virtual marketplaces, and we know that most of us do online shopping. It also changes the way we interface with customers and how we distribute. Traditionally, you'd have to go to the store, you'd have to buy it, you'd have to bring it back. Now you interface using a screen, and some magic person arrives and delivers it at your door. It also increases knowledge transfer, because we can learn so much from other organizations. And that's why Macro, after the riots, have focused so heavily on moving online. And it kills off to your traditional stereotypes. It's the traditional stereotypes of what it means to be successful has changed significantly. To be a successful taxi driver meant A. Under Uber, those rules have changed very, 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 very significantly. And then the natural environment, and we touched on it, the idea of, yeah, and it is a concern of global warming, but we see air pollution, we see water pollution, we see land pollution. All we needed to look at were the beaches after the floods and the rubbish that collected on the beaches. And then global climate change. I really think that the use of fossil fuels and burning traditional fossil fuels has to stop. There are other alternatives available, but I think we're far away from using those alternatives. And then fauna and flora disappearing. You'll see that more medicines disappear because we draw natural ingredients from these medicines. I used to, because I have eczema, bath in a specific emollient, and that emollient disappeared because the cade plant disappeared and we couldn't get cade oil. So something that was important for my skin disappeared completely. And then also the idea to become carbon negative. And it's not to reduce your impact. It's not about carbon neutrality. And we've spoken about this. It is about carbon negativity. You have to do stuff to take carbons out of the air. And I won't talk about my speckwormer, but my speckworm farm is still a big plan where I can donate speckwormer for individuals. The speckworm aren't looking great at the moment. I've had an infestation of bloody bugs, so I'm fighting a little bit to keep my speckwormer alive. And then natural disasters, and we've had a nice natural disaster as an example of that. We know that certain geographic locations, so New Zealand with lots of earthquakes, Japan with lots of volcanoes and earthquakes, and there are a variety of those kinds of geographic locations that are prone to natural disasters. Yeah, and then globalization. Remember, globalization is that thing that gives us the free movement between products, services, skills, and finances across traditional boundaries. So from a globalization perspective, technology has driven it, and not just telecommunications technology, but transport technology. So we can see how globalization and advances in technology have gone hand in hand. One of the big ingredients around around globalization is the formation of multinational organizations. These are those global behemoths with a footprint in every country. So the Googles and the Apples and those kinds of businesses, the Samsungs. And I think the reality is, as part of our pestle factors, we have to look at globalization and the impact of globalization. And then from a global environment, so we look at political factors, ideologies, etc., and we'll spend a bit of time on this in second semester. You have to be aware, if you are going to invest in another country, what the political climate is. You'd have to be aware around some of the legalities of registering businesses, their tax laws, etc., economic factors, where they are. Are they in a recession? What is their GDP? What is their potential growth? Social, cultural factors, the differences between the home nations, values and systems, and where you want to settle. Technological factors in terms of infrastructure, demographics from a population size perspective, and then the natural environment as well.